Hi everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie.
Hello.
And together we are ThinkerThemer. We review games from two different perspectives. I'm all about the mechanics and Maggie is all about the theme. Today we're excited to be reviewing for you Woodcraft by Vladimir Suchy and Ross Arnold and publisher Delicious Games. So let's get into it.
So in Woodcraft, we are master woodcrafters, and we're going to be tasked with, well, creating incredible wood masterpieces. The way we're going to be doing that is we're going to be growing some wood and beautiful trees. Then we're going to be sewing that wood into different types of wood represented by different colored dice, and sewing those dice, not literally, so just to stay calm, splitting them into different values so that we can make the right different types of cuts that we need, and potentially gluing some of those together with a bit of glue, of course. Again, not literally. Euro-like, figuratively, to create the particular pieces that we may need so that we can complete our masterpieces. We're also going to be able to recruit more helpers to our workshop and upgrade our workshop so we can be a lot more efficient as we go through. All of these masterpieces are going to have a point value in the end in the form of little acorns, and whoever has the most acorns by the end wins. Very importantly, the currency is a blueberries. And I feel like that is very important because I wish more games had blueberry as their currency.
It's not a very convenient currency to carry
in real
around.
life, yes. And I was like, why don't we use more fruit as currency?
Well, it would get squished.
It would get squished.
It would go off.
It would get like, oh, I had all these savings and they went rotten. Also, the birds ate my savings. I can see now why we've gone with
Riddled
a
with
different
problems.
material for our currency.
Now, if you're a fan of Vladimir Suchy, then you might be familiar with an action selection wheel. I believe first implemented in Shipyard and then more recently implemented in Praga Kaput Regni. In the center of Woodcraft, you have this action selection wheel that has segments on it representing all of the different actions that you can take in the game. Now, there are 7 actions depicted on each one of these little segments you can see in the first quarter of the action selection wheel. When I decide the action that I want to take, I simply pick up the segment that has it depicted on it and move it over into the next quarter of this wheel. Now, a few things are happening on this wheel to make the choice of which action you want to take more interesting and more compelling to take actions that haven't been selected. As we continue play, the segments are going to be moved along as players select them, and the first time we move past this wheel marker here, it's going to turn. So this is going to turn now, and you can see that now the actions in this first segment have an additional bonus of 2 acorns or 2 victory points, which means that it's more appealing now to take these actions that have been taken less frequently. You can also see that as we're moving them around, there are different bonuses depicted around the wheel. So once this first starting segment is done, this will be revealed and they will also have bonuses. And now I get the bonus in the center as well as the bonus around the outside, depending on how late in that turn order the last action was moved. So first decision is, what action do I want to select and what bonus am I going to get? And now, what are you trying to get done in this game? Well, on your player board, you have this magnificent workshop that you're going to be able to upgrade. Your workshop has space for a few different things. The first thing is your individual workers or employees that are going to be helping you get things done in the game. They give you usually a one-off or an ongoing benefit once you've been able to recruit that employee and put them down in your workshop. Underneath where they go, they also cover up different income tracks. So there are 2 main income tracks in this game. One is for victory points or acorns, and the other is for blueberries or the currency in this game. The other thing that you can do is you can grow new dice. So there are some dice in this pool that you can purchase using one of the actions, but you can also plant them and you can upgrade the different types of trees that grow different types of wood. And what happens is when you're able to plant little seeds in those tree seeds, saplings in the pots.
Yeah.
They are going to upgrade every turn by 2, which means that you're growing these more and more powerful dice. And what are you actually trying to achieve in this game? There are contracts in this game that you are trying to fulfill. And what's really interesting about this game is the longer it takes you to fulfill a contract, the less powerful it becomes. So in each of the contracts, there is a starting point depicted on the top left-hand side of the card. So this says that actually in this tracker of all the contracts I'm trying to achieve, it's going to sit here at this number 1, and I'll come back to what that means in a moment. But as the rounds end, this is going to be moving down and becoming less powerful to the point where it starts to work against you with negative victory points, or negative this symbol, which refers to this track. And this track is the multiplier of what your completed contracts are going to be worth at the end of the game. So you want to be able to get lots of this wreath type symbol.
Reputation. Yeah, I think we said it was probably
reputation.
Like a wreath. Yeah, or a like a seal maybe?
Maybe a seal. Yeah, it's very hard to work out what that is.
It's hard to work out.
But it is a reputation track, and you want to get that as high as possible so you can maximize the points that you're making from your contracts. Each of the contracts requires different dice and different other extra resources that we don't need to go into. But the main thing is how you're going to manipulate these dice, because they represent different lengths of planks of wood, as Maggie mentioned, and you're going to have to use a saw, which is you know built in with 1 in your workshop, but you can build out more. And when you are able to exhaust that saw, you are able to cut up a dice into its component pips. So if I make 1 cut on this dice, it could be a 2 and a 1. So I would take an extra die and represent it now by a 2 and a 1. And what you're trying to do is get the exact value shown on the contract so that you can fulfill them. Later on in the game, you can also upgrade your workshop so that you can use glue to do the reverse. So you can glue these 2 lower valued dice together to become a 3 green, as I showed you before. And there's a couple of other things going on. Well, more than a couple. There is an attic on your workshop, which you are going to be collecting tools on. Tools are just a byproduct of some of the contracts bonuses along the way. They go in these spots, and you basically get one-time bonuses when you are able to connect and grow that like pyramid-like structure with tools. And then you've got this interesting, very interesting marketing track, which allows you to spend blueberry or currency for victory points once per turn. And you can only do that a certain number of times because, you know, there's only 14 turns in a game. And so you're trying to work your way up to having enough leftover money at the end of your turn to be able to move up that and buy yourself more and more victory points. There's also some objectives that are going to be divvied up in a first come, first serve basis, depending on some special contracts that you're going to try to achieve. If 2 players get it in the same round, then they can both have those victory points at the end of the game. But if you're the only one that gets to that round, well, then you'll take that objective and earn some bonus victory points at the end of the game for the conditions specified on the card. So that's a basic overview of how Woodcraft plays, but let's get into how we actually felt about it.
This was so deceptively, welcomingly, and then pow, super crunchy, super brain burny. Probably one of the heaviest games that we play this year.
I would say it's almost certainly one of the okay, it's not difficult in terms of what you're doing, but the way that your turn works and all of the options that are available to you are mind-boggling because it's not just thinking about the action you want to take and then the bonus that you get from that action. It's also, there's all these free actions that you can do on your turn as well, which means that you can kind of elongate your turn by activating different things on your workshop to get things done. Then you're fulfilling contracts, which can give you other bonuses that can help you with your action. So there's multiple layers or steps to your turn turn that you're trying to think through and how to optimize that across the course of a round as well, because at the end of each round there is an income phase, and so you're trying to get as much done and move up those income tracks as much as possible as well before that occurs.
Yeah, I found it really, so learned this from the rule book, and like this is actually, like it all kind of makes sense and made a lot of thematic sense, fairly thematic rule book as well. I was like, yeah, cool, great. And then Amy was like, so is it going to be hard? I'm like, no, I think like it all, and then I taught it and I'm like, okay, let's start playing. It's like, oh my goodness, the choices that you're making and the decisions that you have to like balance, and that's where the crunchiness is.
Yeah, it is super crunchy, but not in a painful way.
No,
just
in a really good,
a really, really good way. But it's hard at first to work out how to be really efficient, how to get those higher scores. And the other thing about the end, the income phase, is that everything that you've exhausted on your board becomes available again, and so you're also trying to time that as well. So really clever. I like that there's some long-term actions like making upgrades to your workshop. In terms of having this potted plants for your new wood to grow, which means that you should probably do that earlier in the game, because then it's going to have more longevity. Likewise the bonuses on the board, but then if you're doing that, then you're not fulfilling those early contracts,
you're forgoing other things.
So it's like, which can leave you like strapped for blueberries. And blueberries are hard to come by in this game.
Sometimes you feel like you're flush with berries, and then at other times
I very rarely feel like that.
Very rarely.
Very rarely. So first thing to note is this game is quite heavy.
Very heavy.
And I would say that if you found other games like quite AP prone, something like Terracotta Army of this year as well that had an action selection wheel, this is way more complex. Way more complex. So,
again, in a good way, but you sort of like be warned.
But if you're not into that, or you have very AP prone friends, this game is going to be long. Long. So anyway, that's the first thing to get away. Anyway, that's the first thing to put out there, is deceptively heavy given the theme. And the theme is incredibly strong.
The theme, I absolutely love this concept of different color wooden dice representing, I picked up the same color dice, different color wooden dice representing different types of wood, and the number representing the length, and then meaning you can actually saw it and split it into two dice that are, let me see if I can find the 5 and the 1, there we go, that are like the sort of splitting the sum of that total die, and then being able to glue them together if you need to make higher value dice. That is such a simple kind of concept to integrate into a mechanic that just makes perfect thematic sense to me.
It does make perfect thematic sense.
And it's like, I don't know why it hasn't been used before. If it has, this is the first time I've come across it, and I absolutely love it. And it works so very, very well.
It does. And there's these little saw tokens as well that are kind of like a resource that you will collect and then spend if you want, that allows you to make an extra cut in that die. So if you wanted to turn a 6 into a 4 and a 1 and a 1, you would have to use one of your saws to make the first cut, and then one of these extra bonuses in order to make the second cut. So you need to think about that too, is how many cuts do I need to make in my die?
The other thing is, one of the actions that you have in your workshop, we just start with the basic one, is using sawdust, which are these little brown cubes, to increase the value of your dice. And that's something that then can be upgraded to increase the value. Initially it's by 1, but then by 2 and 4. And it's like, to me, it's like, well, I'm adding sawdust to like pack up or make this piece of wood a little bit bigger, with, and it's like so many little, like all those little details are actually, like, I could see the thematic link, and the fact that, if you've planted something at the start of every turn, it's going to naturally, automatically grow, which is fantastic. Probably the one area that didn't really make a lot of thematic sense to me was the tools.
Tools in the attic.
Well, so it's all about being able to, if you manage to get, so there's a whole different variety of tools that you have available. Some of the bonuses are going to give you, like, pick any tool, and some of the bonuses, sometimes for completing particular contracts, are going to give you a specific tool. And this whole little puzzle is about trying to make a bit of a pyramid thing here, so I can only start putting things on top once I have the base 2 covered. but you only get the benefit in the middle if the tools are different, which does make a little bit of sense to me. So for example, here
comes the thematic wrench.
Well, so if I were to put another little wrench here, then I would not get this point, or this 1 point, but I would get, because these two would be different, I would get the berries. It makes sense to me in the sense of, like, you do want to have different tools. You don't want the same
variety of tools.
You want to have variety of tools, but why? This is a bit of a strange. It feels a bit more like a tacked on add-on bit.
Yeah. So thematically, it's a bit strange, as Maggie said.
It's where things thematically start kind of going, why am I keeping my tools in the attic? Is that where people keep tools? I don't know. I don't have.
Yeah.
Usually,
But mechanically, it is actually one of the least interesting elements of the game. It does feel like a tacked-on puzzle that gives you the opportunity to get free resources, which is always nice in a game, but it is so hard to do well. And even when I specifically focused on it by choosing starter cards that had free tools and then making it my mission to only take bonuses that gave me free tools, it's almost impossible to do this unless you are perfectly efficient. And then I would argue that I don't think the benefit is great enough to focus on this puzzle. So for me, it doesn't really need to be that. In fact, most of the games we don't even use it.
Tend to ignore it.
Yeah, tend to ignore it. The other thing that I want to talk about is the gluing together action, because that action is something that feels a little bit underutilized in the game as well when you're playing it. And I don't know if that's just because that's the way we play it, but it never felt like beneficial to have to upgrade that part of your board, collect the glue, and then glue dice together. It felt like a very inefficient way to make dice. Better to get higher level dice or grow higher level dice and then saw them into the component parts. That always felt more efficient. Not sure if it is, but definitely feels that way.
I always found that because it's so easy to upgrade the value of your die, it's often faster within a turn to upgrade the value of it, like plan to be able to upgrade the value of a die and then saw it if you need it, then glue two together. It's interesting because they have this thing of, like, if you glue two of the same color, then you get one higher of that color. But if you glue different colors, then you only get to keep one of those two colors, whichever one you choose, but then you get 4 points. So sometimes you might think, oh, that could be a viable strategy. I'm just going to be gluing stuff and getting 4 points along the way. But again, like, that is one of those resources that as soon as you use it once, it's exhausted until an income round comes around. Or if you manage to pick up one of these little kind of refresh tiles along the way that you can get from some of the bonuses. And so it never really felt like a viable
it felt definitely underpowered,
Yeah.
as well as the tools in the attic. But I want to talk about the core mechanic of the game, which is this action selection wheel, because I absolutely adore it. I think that Praga Kaput Regni didn't quite come together for us. But I did like the spark of the idea of the wheel at the time.
The wheel was fun.
I was like, the wheel, that's a great
and
idea.
The trap that it would kind of fall into, like, through
Yes.
but mechanically was cool.
This one creates so much tension in so many different ways, because maybe someone takes the action that you want to take and now they've put it in a spot where it can't move further, or maybe there's just a secondary or like a less appealing action there that you might not want to take, but then it comes with so many extra victory points, or even an additional die that you can straight away add to your collection that you're like, oh, now that's a really attractive option and I need to consider it. So you're constantly weighing up the benefit of all of these different actions that you can take, and that is of course changing with every player's turn, so the options available to you, and so you're rethinking now that has become more appealing. Should I just do that instead? I was planning to do that later, maybe I'll do it now. And then there's this element of the lanterns, which we haven't spoke about. So lanterns are another resource, and they're a really fascinating resource because you can spend one of your lanterns in order to move one tile, but get the bonuses from that tile, but ignore that tile's action and take a different tile's action. And that can allow you to not only do the action that you wanted to do, but get all those appealing bonuses that were stacking up.
Those bonuses are really compelling by the time they get to the really unwanted section. It's like you have a combo of incredibly powerful things in the base and then a super double up boosted ability as
and
well.
I love the way that this builds with one window and then two windows those, and as that wheel moves along, it's revealing those more and more powerful actions. The other thing that lanterns can do is once you have 3 of them, you can spend 3 to take another action. And that is hard to do because lanterns aren't that easy to come by, but a super powerful advantage, because in this game you only get 14 turns and it feels like you are strapped for turns.
It's one of those games where you always feel like, oh, I'm just 1 berry short, or I'm just 1 pip short, or I'm just 1. So it's like the tension level of it is quite very well adjusted or well gauged, I think.
Yeah, and so overall, I felt like this game put a lot of pressure on me as a player.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the puzzle. I love that you can upgrade things and the order in which you do them. You can play around with that. There's interesting, kind of phases of the game, because you have the first half where you've got more simple kind of the employees and the contracts that are available to you are simpler, but then when we move to the second half of the game, they get replaced by new decks, and so you feel like that sudden progression.
Everything levels up a bit.
Yeah, everything levels up. All the actions are becoming more interesting because you've got more things to spend. The marketing track is also really excruciating because you've got to be chipping away at that. So it starts as 2 blueberries for 1 victory point. Not a great exchange, but by the time you get to the top, you're getting large amounts of victory points, but you need to get there first because you have to do them in order. So you're constantly like throwing your spare change at marketing, trying to like get higher and higher in that track.
And you can't just like, oh, I'll wait till the final turn and I'll be flush with catch and I'll do all of it. Like, no, you can only do 1, 1 per turn. So it really does force you to plan ahead. I also want to talk about the different player counts, because we've talked about this AP prone decision wheel here. And so obviously the more players you have, the more likely it is that this is going to be a longer game. When we've played it at 2 players, we've actually managed to get this down to like
under an hour.
Which is, and it feels like quite a satisfying crunchyyyyyy experience for 2.
Yes.
We've played this as well at the higher player counts, and then what happens is the experience of the wheel, things are moving around the wheel a lot more, and so it kind of feels like these super bonus actions become available more frequently than in the 2-player turn. In the 2-player game. In the 2-player game, I always found that we kind of were very efficient at kind of moving everything along together, and so it was rare that you would have a section that had that double thing, double bonus available.
And also, because obviously the more players you have, the longer the game, but because it's AP prone, the more players you have, the more things are changing before your turn comes around. So, yes, you've got more time to think about what you're going to do, but the board is in flux, and so an action might become available to you that wasn't before. And so if your friends or family are AP prone, it can really bog down this game. And so that's just something to be really conscious of. If you've got players who are really familiar with Euros and played this a few times, it's going to be quite speedy because, they can think through the options much faster. When we were playing together, we absolutely didn't have that issue at all. But we are quite familiar with this kind of game. We play a lot of crunchy games, so just bear that in mind, that it can be AP prone and long at those higher play counts. Like that's when it's starting to reach, the 2-hour mark. For us, it's under an hour.
I'll also talk about the solo mode. It's one of my favorite sort of solo mode implementations in general, because it's very, very easy. All you're really doing is you have this deck of cards for your solo. That's going to take the solo kind of it's not really an automa, it's just like your fake opponent turn. And all they're really doing is they're just revealing one thing that they're going to be doing to help kind of move the board along. So for example, in this one, all it would be is they're going to take whatever is last, whatever tile is last, so that they're kind of refreshing that along. And then they're also going to be moving forward in the that reputation track. Another one might be they're just going to, again, it says move that particular tile and give them another point. So or move 2 tiles. Very, very very simple, and then you can go back to your game. So it's the kind of game where you're trying to essentially just beat your own score. It's not I'm going to be competing against this Ottoman, destroying it, or seeing if I come last. But it was such an easy implementation that meant that I was able to just focus on what I wanted to do, focus on what I wanted to explore in the game, and it actually made me a better player.
When I came back to play with Maggie after she'd been playing solo, I was absolutely destroyed in this game. Maggie like doubled my score.
Because this is the type of game where, like, again, it sort of has, from memory, it's like 110 is a good score, and 140, like, you know, between 110 and 140 is like a good score if you're playing solo. But then when we were playing multiplayer, I wasn't able to crack like 70 even. And so it was one of those, I'm like, what am I missing? What is it that I'm not optimizing? And so it gave me the opportunity to explore the game and play out, okay, what happens if I go really strong with my recruits? What happens if I go really strong with the reputation track? And so that allowed me to kind of go, okay, I see. And then, that happened.
One
I was
thing,
able to finally win
by a lot. But one thing I do want to add is that this game is extremely multiplayer solitaire. Yes, there's interaction in terms of the things that you have available to you being impacted by other players around the table, but for the most part you are really focused on your own puzzle, and everything that you are doing is really calculations in your own head. And for me, that is not my usual preferred way of playing a game, but because this puzzle is so difficult to optimize and you're thinking through so many options, I find that I'm quite distracted by that. So it's probably because it's so crunchy, I don't mind that it's less interactive.
So distracted in a good way, you mean?
Distracted in a good way, but it's never going
Entertains, you would say. Baby.
Yeah. It entertains me doing my own puzzle thing, but I really do, like, there were many moments in this game where I was like, Maggie, watch what I'm doing, because I'm doing something really exciting.
And I'm like, but I'm thinking.
Yeah, she's like, I'm thinking about my next turn. And so it does feel very isolating in terms of that puzzle, but it is an interesting puzzle. But for me, that's what brings its rating down a little bit lower. And let's get on to the ratings. I think this is a brilliant thematic Euro. I think it is really great. And if you like heavy games, this is going to be a puzzle that you're really going to enjoy, and enjoy from the first game. It is really great from the first game onwards. The replayability is something that I think, I'm not sure about at this point. I'm enjoying exploring different paths, but I have found that a balanced strategy is generally better. But getting that engine going with your workshop is really important. For me, that's a really long preamble to say that I give it an 8.2. So quite a high score. I think it's a really fantastic game.
I would give this an 8.5 because, again, I really enjoyed the game. But I'll agree, the replayability is a bit of a question mark at the moment because I absolutely loved this game on the first play. And then I was like, okay, I can't wait to get back into it. And then the second play and then the third play. By the fourth and fifth play, I'm like, now I kind of feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over. Because of that balance thing, you end up having to do a little bit of everything. You can't really completely ignore something except for maybe the tools. Like I consistently ignore the tools attic section. But it does feel like, unless I feel like this would get to the point where I wouldn't feel like pulling it out of the shelf anymore unless you bring in some kind of expansion or something else that adds a new dimension.
It definitely needs some, even though there's a lot going on, it probably does eventually need some expansion content, because once you've gone through all the cards and seen what's available, it's like, okay, and it is like, okay, I need to upgrade my workshop in these certain ways every time. Yeah. The only difference is what you kind of start with and the starting contracts. That kind of does change a little bit your direction in the game. Yeah. And I do like, though, if you enjoy like a difficult Euro playing a 2-player count, it is just, as a 2-player count, it's just a really nice, like, competitive puzzle to beat your own score, but also to beat your opponent's score. Yeah. So it is tight and it's interesting, and I think a lot of Eurogamers are really going to enjoy this one. If you enjoyed this review, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now. Bye.